Welcome to the Coaching Playbook podcast. I'm Adrian O'Sullivan, and as the host of the Hurling mini-series, I'll be having coaching conversations with some of the top performers in the hurling coaching game. Today's show is once again sponsored by the Irish Strength and Conditioning Network. The Irish S&C Network is a diverse coaching network that includes members from a wide range of fields, from S&C coaches, sports scientists and physiotherapists, students, hobbyists, and basically anyone with an interest in coaching at all levels of sport and performance. As a listener of the Coaching Playbook, the Irish S&C Network is offering a 30-day free trial for all our listeners. Simply use the code ISCNPLAY at checkout to access this fantastic opportunity and all the experience from the practitioners on that network. So today's guest is a vastly experienced coach who has operated at top level of GAA, Camogie and League of Ireland. He's my S&C coach with Dublin Camogie team and completely changed my thinking on how a team should be conditioned. Welcome to the Coaching Playbook, Conor Clifford.
Hi Adrian, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Happy with that intro?
I'm very flattered, yeah.
There's lots more I could have said as well, but we'll keep it professional for the moment.
We won't go tit for tat, will we?
No, definitely not. Conor, as I mentioned, vastly experienced S&C coach, operated at the highest level across soccer and GAA. But just tell us a little bit about your own sporting background and how you ended up progressing down the S&C route then.
Yeah. So I suppose like everybody, I would have played multiple sports when I was a kid. I'm constantly playing out in the street and that sort of stuff. So I was always dabbling in different things. And then when I was about 13 or 14, I got involved in boxing in the local boxing club. And that was the one I suppose I really stuck at, and that took off for me. Now I would have even been in and out of boxing a little bit throughout the years of, there might have been a couple of years of messing around as well, and in the later teen years and early 20s and stuff, I started taking the boxing a little bit more seriously, and became quite interested in the S&C through boxing. So, so in my later teen years or in my early 20s, one of the big boxers at the time would have been Manny Pacquiao. And he had it was at the time, I don't know if you would have ever seen those 24/7 documentaries that they done before big fights.
Yes.
Yeah, really good documentaries, yeah. And he had an S&C coach who always featured very heavily in his 24/7s called Alex Ariza, who he just became the first big S&C coach in boxing. He would often share tidbits from the fight camps, or he certainly had a different approach to training fighters than traditionally what would have taken place. And so I just became interested in it through that. At the same time, I think T Nation and a couple of these other big blogs were sort of getting big. So there was a lot of information there around training and gym culture and the gym as a process, I suppose. And I just became obsessed with all that sort of stuff. It just became a huge interest and passion of mine. And I actually went to Maynooth initially to study. I was doing an arts degree, so I was 2 years into an arts degree studying sociology and geography before I actually started the part-time S&C degree in Setanta. And that actually crossed over with while I was still in Maynooth. I had already started that. And I had a friend, Dahi McCabe, who was working in a place called NADA, the National Athlete Development Academy. So he invited me down one day to help out with doing some assessments with a team. So I went down and did that. And I just sort of hung around that place then for the next couple of months. So just going there most days. It was obviously an unbelievable training facility. So I was going there, being able to use the facility to train, and then just helping them out with whatever I could, whether it was, moving things around in the facility, or if a team was coming in to help with some sort of assessments or whatever else was taking place. And that in itself, I suppose, turned into an informal, let's say, an internship. And towards the end of that, after a couple of months there, Martin and Murray, the two directors of the company, just offered me a job. They obviously just seen me hanging around long enough there, thinking we might as well make use of this fella, So I wasn't there too long. I wasn't working there too long. I got the job in August of 2013. Martin, who was the boss there, was the S&C coach for the Dublin Senior Footballers at the time. He went with them when Jim Gavin started with them. And through him, then the under 21, it would have made sense at the time as well, to have some progression from under 21 to senior. So they came into NADA, and me and Dahi took them on as our little project in 2014. Dahi moved on then after that, so I stayed with the under-21, the Dublin under-21 football team through 2014, 2015 and 2016 seasons. So that was good experience. There was an All-Ireland win and 3 Leinster wins in there. Obviously working with an amazing management team who have gone on now to win a senior All-Ireland with the lads this year. So yeah, great experience, unbelievable experience to get at that early stage in my career, and to be mentored by Martin Kennedy and to be just around that place and those people was you literally couldn't ask for better. Certainly not in the country of Ireland anyway. While I was with them then, so while I was with Dublin under-21 football in 2015, then I was appointed as the S&C coach for Shamrock Rovers first team as well. So I was with them for the 2015 and 2016 seasons. In 2016, I opened my first sort of physical gym as well myself. So in the meantime, between me beginning with the under-21 football team and finishing with them in 2016, Martin had moved on. Martin, the boss, and that had moved on to take a role with the RFU. Now that was closed down, so I was asked to stay on with the under-21s and to stay on with Shamrock Rovers. So I set up as a sole trader and was sort of operating as just a contractor, bouncing between both of those teams. But luckily enough, I had always planned on opening my own location, and I opened a little sort of brick and mortar gym in 2016. That necessitated me then to step away from teamwork just so I could concentrate on getting some clientele into that business and get built up. So I was there for a short time, moved to a bigger location. Once I was in that bigger location, then Brian Cullen, who was the director of performance for Dublin GAA, approached me about taking a team on. So obviously I jumped at that, and it turned out the team anyway was the Dublin Senior Hurlers. It was Pat Gilroy's first year with them. So I started with them in, I think, maybe October, November 2017 to get going for the 2018 season. Pat obviously stepped down abruptly at the end of that year because of his own sort of career requirements. Maddie came in. I stayed with Maddie for another 2 years then. And once again, I moved location and started something new up here in Round Towers, Clondalkin, where I am now in Round Towers GAA Club. So we moved into, they have an unbelievable facility here. We moved in here. We operate our commercial business out of here, and we're in charge of the physical development pathway for the club here as well. So we work with under 11s all the way up in Round Towers. So I sort of stepped away again to try and, build the business up and sort of get that arm of the business going. And then in 2021, I was approached by Adrian O'Sullivan to come on board. I think you were in your second year with the Dublin Camogie team by that stage, or going into your second year with the Dublin Camogie team. So you thankfully asked me to come on board there. That was an unbelievable year, a great year of work, really enjoyable, really fruitful, I think. So I was with the Dublin Camogie team then for 2022. And then again, had no county stuff on in 2023, still busy with lots of club stuff. And going forward now for 2024, I'm with the Westmeath Senior Hurlers. So I've been bopping around with different county teams for a lot of my years anyway, which has been very fortunate, definitely very lucky to be in that position. And then working with all sorts of clients. So we obviously have Armoured Performance, the business that I run here. We have
that plug will cost you.
We have, yeah.
We're keeping track of the mentions here. €50 mention. This podcast doesn't run itself, Conor.
I thought there was a free sponsorship going here now. So the business that we run here, we would deal with all sorts of athletes so we deal with general population people and athletes from all levels. So like I said, under 11, all the way up in the GAA, we have powerlifters, we have combat athletes, we have cross-country runners, Ironman, everything. So we're sort of spread out around a lot of different areas, but a lot of the focus is on sport and on sports performance or strength and conditioning as well.
No, it's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there, I suppose. One thing that jumps out at me, first of all, before I ask a different question, like obviously you kind of put yourself out there working for free, just hanging around nada, trying to make an impact. Like you'd hear of a lot of S&C coaches kind of thinking that just because they have a degree, they're going to jump into a job. Like, is there a lesson there for young S&C coaches? You have to put yourself out there and kind of suppose, do the internships and get the experience before you can expect to step into something a little bit bigger?
Maybe, yeah. I think the whole notion of internships, I don't know how viable that is going forward. I think people are starting to cop on a little bit there, because there are some very big organisations like the IRFU and others that are looking for interns with master's level degrees and stuff, which is just ridiculous. Like, you know, they can afford to pay people, and they should be. But I think so much of the job has to do with your ability to stand in front of people and talk to them and relate to them, and create some buy-in and hear what their goals are, or what their sort of what makes them tick in a way, I suppose, and try to use that to help them along. So the only way to do that is to actually get busy doing it, you know. So even for us, when we're hiring new coaches here, one of the determining factors for us is, has that person coached before? And it doesn't really matter what level they've coached at, as long as we can see that they have gone out and tried to get busy coaching, and that would show then that they actually have a clear passion for coaching as well, and not you know, we might get plenty of applicants that are more into the sports science end of stuff, or, you know, might be more into, I don't know, some other type of area within sport, but not so much coaching. And for us, it's always important the people that work here need to be coaching first, like, you know. So certainly I'd say if you're an aspiring S&C coach, especially if you're involved with GA, the opportunities to work with teams in GA is just ridiculous. Like, you know, there's any amount of teams in every club that you could go and work with. So if you're an aspiring S&C coach, I would say definitely do get busy coaching. For us, even when we were in NADA, we had, so my friend Dahi is also a boxing background as well, and we had groups of boxers that we were bringing in there and working with for free, just the same again, to get busy coaching, get busy programming. You know, the best way to develop is to learn as you're doing the job, really, I suppose.
Yeah, communication is so important. I think there's hundreds of people out there that have loads of knowledge, but if you can't communicate it, it's a waste of time. And I suppose these are the soft skills that you need to learn to be a coach, isn't it? And they're not necessarily going to be picked up, as you say, in coaching courses or anything. I'd just like to apologise to any listeners who are offended by Conor calling the GA. That's okay as well. That's all right. We'll move on from that. To go back to talking about Manny Pacquiao's coach, I didn't quite catch his name there, but this guy obviously kind of changed the approach to S&C coaching and boxing. So it's an interesting, I suppose, the thing that I think a lot about is that players these days have more information at their fingertips than ever before, right? And all this information is out there. And from that point of view, I suppose, I feel as a hurling coach, I have to be on the ball and have to be up to date with modern methods and stuff like that. Did your, I suppose, research, your education, the fact you were learning about S&C, did that lead to any clashes with your boxing coaches with regards to the methods they wanted to use? Because I suppose boxing coaching would have been seen as old school. You know, you get out, you pound the roads, you hit the bags. Like, were you trying to bring something different to it? Did it lead to any clashes? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, probably very much so. So the other S&C coach, by the way, his name was Alex Arize. Now, in hindsight, having had a bit more education and obviously a good bit more experience and stuff, there might have been a lot of stuff that he did back then that I would disagree with now, like, you know. But the main thing was that there was an integrated S&C coach there in the camp, and he was very much front and center when it came to, I suppose, a lot of the media stuff and that, you know. Whereas traditionally, and what you still see now is, even if a boxer has an S&C coach, that will be sort of exterior to his normal boxing work. So there might be not a whole lot of cohesion between the boxing coach and between the S&C coach. And usually the boxer is paying for it off his or her own back. So it's still not as fully advanced as it should be, certainly in pro boxing anyway.
That's crazy
for myself.
In team sports, if the coach and the S&C coach aren't on the same page, it's going to lead to chaos. Like, I can't see how it'd be any different with a boxer, you know.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not ideal, and I think a lot of boxing coaches, even though they have the best will in the world, a lot of boxing coaches tend to be controlling people, whether that's how they are by nature or because of the way it's always been, is that the boxing coach ends up being the coach, the cut man, the person who wraps the hands, the person who organises the fight, manages the fighter, the S&C coach, everything else. So when that's the way it always has been done, it probably is hard to change that, like, you know. But from my own perspective, I don't like the same thing when we went when we boxed, like it was you go down to the club, you do your warm up, your bit of shadow boxing, bag work, pad work, sparring. So it always worked in that order. So S&C didn't really feature into it too much. So anything I was doing was really directed by myself and what I was reading online and that sort of stuff. And it was woeful anyway. I know now when I look back, it was all woeful stuff, But I think it's probably nearly two sides of something there, in that boxing itself, probably the sport itself there was no appreciation of S&C there, or even if there was an idea of S&C, it wouldn't be what I would class as sports performance training or strength and conditioning. People would just slap the name strength and conditioning on a circuit class or whatever the case was. And then for me personally, I probably ended up having too much of a focus on S&C, or too much of a focus on the strength and conditioning aspect for myself, in that it certainly wasn't the limiting factor for me. It wasn't fitness or wasn't strength. I probably would have been better off, even though I did make a concerted effort to get out and get competitive or non-friendly spars and get plenty of fights and stuff. But certainly for me, I probably just needed more time between the ropes to get better at boxing and better at the sport.
What, 130 kilos, which you get in the face jabbed off yourself in the ring?
This is it. Yeah.
Not much of a consolation. The cut man tried to patch you up.
Yeah. And then obviously in boxing, because it's a weight categorized sport, you do have to have quite a bit of I suppose it's a fine line, between getting your training load right for improving your strength and improving your power, and then making sure you're not your training load and your diet aren't getting to a point where you're going to end up in another weight category, But thankfully, I think if anything, nutrition has probably expanded in boxing a bit better than S&C has, so a lot of boxers do have, seemingly anyway, good support there from a nutrition point of view.
You still hear some horror stories around combat sports and cutting and all that as well, but I suppose it probably has improved. Look, like a lot of what we spoke about there is focused on an individual. How did you find it then, transitioning from, I suppose, being focused on yourself, or maybe focused on individuals, to having to coach a team of, I suppose, 20 individuals? Because I suppose teams are a collective of individuals and they all have different needs. So did you find that difficult, or how was the transition?
I can't say. I don't think being involved in an individual sport has sort of made the transition into coaching a team sport any harder. The only thing that's probably, and this might have nothing to do with having been a background in boxing, it might be just me personally, but I find it hard. And you probably wouldn't see this too much at county level, more so club level. I find it hard to see people on the same team giving different levels of effort. It's hard to see that and not be frustrated by it when you see somebody who clearly isn't putting in the same effort as the rest of their teammates, even though they all should be working towards a common goal. So that can be hard at club level. You just have to get used to it a little bit, I suppose, and understand that for some people there's a bit of a it's a mixture of trying to perform on the pitch and having maybe a social outlet and just turning up and training with their mates or whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm. It is difficult at club level, because you just don't have that. You go to the manager, look, your man isn't putting it in the gym, but he hasn't missed a free since 2017, So it's like we literally can't function without him, and there's no one else there. So it is difficult. And from a manager's perspective, it is like, I think club is such a balancing act compared with county, where you could say to a lad, listen, there's another 15 of you waiting to get in this team, buck up, or as David Hardy said, fit in or fuck off the last day.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can't really do that at club level, can you? You have to be a bit more.
And even at county level, you still have to. I mean, not every county is awash with talent or awash with players who are willing to commit. And even still, at the end of the day, if somebody's a superstar, maybe some of what makes that person a superstar is that little bit of cheekiness and that little bit of cuteness about them, that they'll cut a corner here, or they that whole thing about if you're not cheating, you're not trying, so
they are rare though. Like my experience, I don't know what your experience is that the top class performers are the ones who are putting it in as well. Like it's rare.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's rare that the guys who cut the corners are the ones that shoot the lights out every day of the week as well. Like it does happen, but
Yeah, and I think overall there's a consistency thing there. So if you're somebody who trains consistently and performs consistently, you can be counted on for the big days. You know, if you're somebody who you know can turn up in one way or turn up in another way, I suppose it makes it very hard then for a management team to really sort of put stock in you when it matters. Like, you know, that's I suppose the big thing there. But yeah, I think certainly there's a big difference between club and county there, and like I said, for me, I'm not sure if it was because I had a background in an individual sport where, you know, I was sort of responsible for my own performance and that was all that mattered. But it does make it hard to not to get frustrated by that, I suppose.
Well, there is that more, I suppose, individual responsibility in that if you don't put in the work, some lad's going to batter you in the ring. Whereas sometimes you can hide in the match maybe or get away with it, or if you are the free taker, you know, you get a clap in the back for hitting 11 points or whatever. Whereas there's nowhere to hide really in an individual sport, is there? It's just
exactly,
on you.
Yeah.
You know.
And I suppose there's the performance aspect, how you do on the day of the fight, but also, you know, training wise, it's a lot harder you can't really hide your training from yourself, like, you know. So maybe when you're involved in an individual sport, you have that temperament more where you feel like you need to have trained to the best of your ability to be able to perform. Maybe just people, you know, get away with it a little bit more in team sport, and you might have more of that personality there. Like, but look, there's certainly I've definitely came across plenty of people in boxing who wouldn't train very hard and still happily turn up and have a fight, like, you know.
It's mad for a scrap.
Maybe it's just me. Yeah, maybe it's just me.
If you're not fighting inside the ring, they'll be fighting outside Supermax. Yeah, you have those ads as well. So you're talking about the difference there between, I suppose, between club teams and county teams and different attitude. You've obviously worked as a professional coach with Shamrock Rovers. What's the difference like between a professional sports team and an inter-county GA team in your eyes? And bear in mind now that most of the guys listening here think that David Clifford could go and knock 15 or 16 goals in for Man City at a draw if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But like, what are the key differences, I suppose, attitude-wise, I suppose, setup-wise, resources-wise, like, if there is any, at the top level?
Yeah, I'm not too sure how much I can offer there, because when I was at Shamrock Rovers, the League of Ireland was still sort of clawing its way back out of the recession. The personalities that were there, even from, you know, an executive level at the club, there was a lot of people there who probably weren't too concerned with. Well, there was people at executive level in the club there who weren't too bought into the whole idea of S&C. There were plenty of players there who were the same. It was a bit of a weird mix of people there, and that you had some highly professional people who had spent most of their careers in the UK, the likes of Damien Duff, Steve McPhail, Keith Fahey. So they were exemplary in their approach, and that's why they were so successful in the first place. You had some other people who probably could have made much more themselves, but never really cared enough. So the League of Ireland is sort of where they landed. And then you had some people who were probably exceeding their potential in one way. So they were trying really hard, but maybe they didn't have that much talent. So again, the League of Ireland at that time is where they landed. The league is, just even watching from the sides, the league has definitely come on leaps and bounds in that sort of way. Like, you know, I mean, the quality of the play is just unbelievable anyway compared to when I was there. But I know for a fact from speaking to people, I have friends that are involved in S&C in the league. I have a brother-in-law that's involved in coaching in the league, and I know for a fact it's much more professionalised now and much more advanced, facilities-wise and everything. Them top teams, they all have, you know, like when I was with Shamrock Rovers, even the gym facilities were. Most of the equipment was mine that I sort of carried over from the back garden shed, like, you know. So it was very, like, if anything, I would have said the the Dublin under-21 football team had a better setup than Shamrock Rovers at that time. Whereas I imagine it's totally changed. It is totally changed now. I know for a fact that it's totally changed. Certainly in the case of Shamrock Rovers, anyway, I know they have a fully professionalised setup now. They have, you know, they didn't even have GPS when I was there. They have GPS units. They have their own training ground. They have their own gym. All the players are full-time now. There would have been still a few when I was there that were part-time, you know, that type of thing. So it is totally different now. So
really kind of, I suppose, comes down to the fact that the Gaelic footballers were probably labelled amateur but were professionals, and the soccer players were labelled professionals were probably amateurs with regards to the approach, you know, which is very interesting.
Now there were brilliant personalities there as well, and people that really did buy in and there was a lot of good work being done there as well. But it doesn't take too many to sort of derail the whole thing, But certainly, I think the league is in a far better place. And look, a lot of that is to do with the league got flooded with cash, and that's what happened there. That's the way football is, or soccer is, I think. Yeah.
But our big takeaway from this, though, is that Dublin GA have more money than Shamrock Rovers. That's the key thing. That's what we know. That's what or they did at the time. That's interesting. It's very interesting. I didn't realise that. I suppose that the League of Ireland has come on such a journey in such a short time as well. So it's very, very interesting insight. Look, one of my favorite saying is what's measured gets managed. Okay, so I suppose as a coach, how much do the numbers impact on what you do on the training pitch and on the gym? So you've mentioned GPS there, obviously testing and things like that. Just give us a little insight into exactly how much the numbers play in what you do day to
day. So a fair bit, I'd imagine. So you have your saying. So there's another one. If you're not assessing, you're just guessing. So a lot of the stuff I do would start with some sort of assessment. So like from a gym point of view, you'd have a couple of key lifts that you're going to want to have an idea of what their 1RM is or what their maximum on that lift is. So that's from sort of having a profile of the player, and also for being able to inform the player of what weights to use when he or she is in the gym. Then after that, there'd be a jump profile taking place there. So a few different types of jumps. The idea being there, and you get an idea of what that player is like from a power production point of view. So some players are going to be very, very good at the velocity end of the spectrum. So the more speed related exercises, so your plyometrics, your sprints and that sort of stuff. And then some players are going to be very good at the force end of stuff. So that might be more like a loaded jump, a hang power clean, or just the traditional strength training stuff like your squat, your deadlift, or your bench press. So if you have an idea of that sort of profile of a player, for one thing, it allows you to monitor those sort of those key data points, those jumps. So over time, you're looking for all of those to move up. And in particular, you're probably looking for their basic counter movement jump. So just a normal unloaded jump. That's the one that's a general indicator of lower body power. That's the one that you're probably, from a jumping point of view, that's the one that you're probably going to look at most often. So yeah, that would help determine exactly what way you'll go with that player's gym program. And this is for me personally. Some of that will depend on the time of the year as well. So in the early part of the year, I'm a big fan of trying to work a lot on what that player might be considered weaker at. So if I have a very force dominant player, so think of your sort of big, tall, massive sort of whatever, a corner forward or somebody that's up there to win the ball and to just, plow through defenders. That player is probably going to be very good at the force end of stuff. So very good at lifting, obviously very strong, probably good at jumping with load. So doing loaded counter movement jumps or whatever the case is. And he's probably not going to be very fast. Obviously, if he has a huge body mass, he has more to move around the pitch. So it's going to be harder for him to interact with the ground at speed. So a lot of what he does early on in the year might be more focused around that velocity and the stuff. And then typically what people are good at is what they enjoy doing. So that player, for the most part, is going to love bench pressing, is going to love deadlifting, is going to love hang power cleans, whatever the case is. So when we get closer to the meaty end of the season, when you want that player to feel as prepared as possible, I'll try and give them a little bit more of that type of stuff. Some of that is obviously down to, like I said, down to what they're like physically, and then some of it is down to that sort of player's personality and their own psyche. So you're going to have to get to know the player a little bit for that as well. But we will do that power profile at the start.
Those soft skills, like it's like from all the guests we've had on, it's just such a big thing. Is like trying to connect that on that level with the player and those soft skills, and just it's that old saying, the only way to treat everyone the same is to treat them differently. It's so important, isn't it? Like you have to understand who you're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the good thing about those tests then is they create a conversation piece as well. So you can actually talk to the player while you're doing the test. It's a good opportunity to talk to the player and get to know them, and then as you're going along, then when you're reflecting or debriefing the player on the results of the tests, and as you're going along in the program, they're a good thing to refer back to. Remember when we did this test and you scored, X on that, or you didn't score great on that. that's why we're doing this exercise here, is to try and improve this, so it can create a bit of context for the program for the player. And then in addition to those gym-based tests, then we'd have some sort of conditioning test that we do on the field. The last couple of years for me, that's been a Bronco test. That's just, I suppose that's just what I've been going with the last couple of years, and because I've been using it, I'm continuing to use it because I have good good normative data there, let's say, across various different sort of populations, different levels of playing. But like from a practical point of view, if there are other coaches out there using other tests, that doesn't bother me. As long as, for me, an aerobic test should be a test of aerobic capacity. So I think the mistake people can make is trying to make it look too much like the game, or too much like, what they think hurling is, or whatever, what they think, Gaelic football is, or whatever. So you're testing aerobic capacity, so it should be a fairly straightforward running test. There are other ways of testing other qualities. And the only thing that's really specific to the game, I suppose, is playing the game itself. So I think getting caught up too much in trying to replicate the game in your testing can be a mistake.
Mm-hmm. I'd say a lot of our listeners might use mass tests as well. Conor, do you have any? Is that a preference thing for yourself? Is there differences between the two, or have you a little bit of insight into that for us, just from your own experience?
Yeah, well, so essentially they're the same thing. So whether you do a 1,200 meter shuttle, whether you do a 1,200 meter sort of, test around the circular track, whether you do 1,400 meters, or whatever way you want to break it down, as long as you're factoring in, if there are turns there, they need to be factored. So there is an equation for factoring those turns into the Bronco. The other reason I like the Bronco is because it takes up at most 60 meters space. So in the wintertime, yourself, when you're on a boggy pitch, there'll be sections of that pitch that are totally unrunnable. So you can usually eke out a good sort of 60 meter bit of space there.
The groundsman would be after you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And very repeatable then as well. You're not too tied down to needing, say, a 100 meter length or a 140 meter length if you're doing a 1,400 meter 10 times, or whatever the case is. So the only thing, I know lots of coaches probably would have traditionally used a 1K test, and lots of them still do use a 1K test. I think if you're going to estimate mass, if you're going to estimate maximum aerobic speed from a test, in theory, the test needs to take around 5 minutes. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit longer than that, or even maybe slightly shorter than that, isn't too much of a worry. But even at club level, you get players doing 1Ks and 3 and a bit minutes, and it's probably just a bit too fast for you to estimate mass from. And that it's if they're a fast player, they can hide behind their speed quite a bit, and then also if it's that fast, they haven't really taxed into their aerobic system effectively yet, or properly yet. So in theory, what mass is like what it sounds like, maximum aerobic speed. So it's the speed that you can run at while utilizing your aerobic system as the main energy source, or as the primary energy source. So if that test is too short, you haven't effectively reached their mass, like, if that makes sense. So I would try and pick a distance regardless of what way you're doing that test. You should have an idea, if you're working with a team, or if you've worked with teams at that level before, what distance will get the majority of those players in 5 minutes or more. Now, you're always going to run in, like at club level especially, like you'll do it, and you'll have players coming in at 4.5, 4:45 minutes. And then you're always going to have some players coming in, unfortunately, around the 7 minute mark, or whatever the case is. Yeah. But obviously, you're just trying to suit it as best you can to the majority of the players, or to the main sort of group of players that are in the squad. Yeah,
no, that's really interesting insight. I think mass is easy because the maths is easy on it as well. So I think if a lad is on his own, it's kind of easy to replicate. But like, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying there. It has to be a certain distance to really be a proper gauge of the aerobic capacity. So I think that's a big takeaway for people listening. You're probably the first coach, Conor, who showed me how to use GMS properly, or GPS properly. GMS is something we use in my day job. It's completely different. GPS. I suppose there's probably still a cohort of GA people out there who just think that it's used to take Cullen Boyle off after 55 minutes of a match. But like, can you explain to our listeners in simple terms, I suppose, for people who've never used it before, what the benefits are for using GPS to prepare teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose there are two within sports science or sports performance. There are two sort of camps when it comes to GPS. how to use them. And obviously, look, there are people that fall in the middle or whatever, but I suppose there's a lot of people who use it. It is in its basic essence, it's a monitoring tool, or it's a tool for making sure that training load is appropriately dosed. So there's a term in sports science called the minimum effective dose, and basically what that's getting at is that the training load that we apply should be the minimum amount of training load that will yield the gain or the adaptation or the result that we want. So from a point of view of, let's say, if 3 sets of 5 on a deadlift will get me 90% of the results, and 5 sets of 5 will get me 100%, then maybe the minimum effective dose there might be the 3 sets of 5. So that's a sort of paradigm or a way of thinking within S&C. I probably fall into the latter category, the other one. So there's another term, maximum recoverable volume or maximal adaptive volume, essentially the same thing. And that would be probably what I use the GPS for myself. I imagine that might not be the case with a lot of S&C practitioners, but it is. I suppose it just boils down to individual philosophy. But for me, the whole point of using the GPS is to allow the team to train as hard as possible. That's the way I would look at it. So obviously, you're not doing anything reckless. You're not doing anything negligent. But if you can systematically and continuously apply a progressively heavier training load on the pitch, so whether that's through your high-speed running, HMLD, XLs, DCLs, whatever, you're going to be looking at all those metrics. And over time, certainly in that pre-season phase, you want that number to creep up. So that basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to improve the team and the players' tolerance to training so that they can effectively train at a higher level. They can train at a higher intensity more often without needing breaks for recovery, without worrying about breakdown from injury, without worrying about a drop in performance if you have a game coming up or whatever the case is. So that, I suppose that just goes down to, like I said, a personal philosophy. A big thing that I believe in is that the hardest working team wins the All-Ireland Championship every year, or wins the championship, whatever the sport is, every year. So I don't think there's anybody out there that could convince me that over the past 6-7 years, the Limerick hurling team haven't accumulatively been the hardest working team over that period of years. Likewise with the Dublin football team when they were in their pomp, I don't think anybody else was working harder than them. And like I said, it's accumulative, so it could be over many years. You get these teams that say Tyrone won a couple of years ago, maybe they had a good year the year before and then a really good year that year. And by hard work, I don't just mean training hard on the pitch or training hard in the gym, because actually for lots of players that's easy. They enjoy that part of it. So hard work would be your video analysis, looking after your nutrition, making sure your lifestyle is right, making sure you're reflective and introspective and trying to improve yourself as a player, trying to improve your own performance, mindset, whatever the case is. Hard work is different things for different people. And it's all of those things matter to a team. So I think the team that wins at the end of every year is going to be the team that does all of those things at the highest level to their best of their ability. And the S&C forms part of that. The training load forms part of that. The gym load forms part of that. Over time, you need to be accumulating more and more of that good work. And for me, then that's sort of the way I think about using the GPS is not in any one session. How can we do more? But over time, over big blocks of time, how can we get more work into this team so that at the end of the day, we need them to be able to go out onto the pitch and train hurling at a very intense, fast, high level for longer and longer durations if possible. Obviously, we're not trying to keep them out there for 2 hours, but we want to be able to train at a high intensity for long periods of time. That means they're going to get more touches. It means they're going to be getting more tackles. It means they're going to be getting more changes of direction. It means they're going to be getting more opportunities to think about the game under those sort of strict, fast game demands. So that would be how I think about using the GPS. Mm-hmm. So you would need for that to work for you. Obviously, you need to be tracking every single session that every single player does. You need to have your sort of KPIs identified. So what are the metrics you're going to be looking at? You need to look at acute chronic workload ratio. So making sure that there are no major spikes in training. and at the same time making sure that there are no major lulls in training. So if you have a big lull in training load, certainly if it's not a planned lull, it's not a deload or anything like that, then all you're doing is giving yourself, more work to do to sort of climb back up to where you were at from a training load point of view. Like, so I think a little bit of consistency in loading is important all the time, and then making sure in that pre-season period that you're trying to steadily increase the load the whole time, so that by the time you get to the meaty part of the season, the championship stages, your players can tolerate a high workload. They can have a game on the weekend and still train very hard the next week. And like I said, you're not worried about injury. You're not worried about performance drop off. So that's pretty much how I think about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here now whether I thought any differently about S&C before I met you, or whether I'm nodding along with everything you're saying because you've been absolutely brainwashed. But I suppose there's a lot of things to unpack there. I think the coach S&C physio relationship is absolutely crucial. It kind of goes back to what we said at the start. Like, you have to trust the physio. She has to trust what's been done on the S&C side, and the coach can't operate outside the realm of that. Like, in fairness, we were very good at planning the sessions in Dublin, and like, it was very much, look, this is what we can do this week, or this is what we can't do this week, or Joe. It wasn't the case that I was rocking on as the coach, going, right lads, we're gonna fucking flog them into the ground now because they were useless on Saturday or whatever. It's like, there was no reactive stuff. It was all planned. Workload is planned. I think my overriding philosophy as a manager or a coach is that you have to get all your players to the start of the championship in the best condition possible. I think it's a good philosophy to use, because ultimately, if you don't get the training loads right, you're going to lose players to injury. If you don't get the training load right, you're not going to be fit enough. I think it's kind of an overriding philosophy for me, is like, if we're starting championship second week in August, my whole year is based around getting as many players as possible in the best condition by the time we start championship.
Absolutely, yeah.
But like, a real interesting thing you said there as well is talk about acute loads, and I suppose I'm just trying to give the coach's perspective on it, because maybe a lot of our listeners might be coaches as opposed to S&C coaches, and one of my bugbears is detraining in between championship games. I think, like, especially for the guys who aren't getting game time, you can actually see lads disimproving as the season goes on, as the championship goes on. They've got to a certain point before championship, and then nothing. Like, I'm a big believer in big load on a Tuesday night after a championship match, and just reducing the time, not the intensity. Like, that's the way I would go about it. So I think their takeaways for a coach as well is that you can trade on through championship. We can be a bit, I suppose, wrapping lads in cotton wool a little bit at times, but a lot of interesting takeaways there, Conor. I suppose, look, a lot of our listeners will be club coaches, right? And we've said before that coaching at club level can be quite difficult. Teams may not have a full-time S&C, or mightn't have the resources maybe of a county team and stuff like that. I suppose if we go back to maybe the pitch conditioning first and foremost, right? Because obviously we wouldn't recommend that anyone goes and takes a team into the gym if they're not qualified. So we're not even going to go there. But can you give some maybe easy implementable tips to coaches that are kind of trying to run their own field conditioning? Like, as we said, testing, retesting, easy implementable stuff like that.
Yep. Well, certainly I'd say perform some sort of assessment at the start, or obviously it's fine, or it's probably advisable to do maybe 1 or 2 sessions if you're coming back off an off-season period, especially in a club where you haven't been given. You can't stand over players maybe staying fit over the off season and haven't done an appropriate amount of running as well. So if you want to do a couple of sessions of ease and work, that's fine. But early on, I would say get some sort of assessment done with them. Like, there are plenty of them, like you were saying, some sort of mass time trial or the Bronco, or even a yo-yo test would be fine. But yeah, get some sort of aerobic capacity test done with them. That'll give you an idea of where the squad is at as a whole. It'll give you an idea of where there are players who need lots of work, where players who maybe don't need as much work. And then from there, try to cater to the individuals. So not even on an individual player by player basis, but certainly, grouping players off into, let's say, your fittest group, your middle group, and your least fit group. Because in the same way, it's not going to make sense to bring a team into a gym and turn around to everybody in that gym and say, right, lads, we're all doing 4 sets of 5 at 80 kilos on the bench press, because some players are going to get pinned under that load. Some players are maybe they're going to manage to do it, but they're not going to recover for the next gym session, or they might get exposed themselves to injury or whatever the case is. So for that same reason, you do want a little bit of a differentiated load between your players when you're doing some running work on the pitch. But again, it doesn't have to be overly complex. Keep it simple, especially if you're coaching a full session where you're doing skills work, you're doing all the sort of drills and everything. The last thing you want to be doing is going out and setting up 6 different lines of cones for the players to run to. So 3 different distances or whatever the case is, whatever is simple for you. Mm-hmm. And try and dose that appropriately. So try and there's plenty of information out there of how to prescribe maximum aerobic speed intervals. So you could use that. If you're doing tempo stuff, the players should be still crossing the finish line at different speeds. So do try and cater for the individuals. And along those same lines, if you have, like, even at club level, you're going to have players there who are super, super fit people, and that's might be that player's thing. So it's not going to make a whole lot of sense doing 10 minutes of running with that player at the end of a session if he or she is already the fittest player on the team and it's not a limiting factor in that player's game. Maybe give that player a chance to go off and focus on some sort of skill element or whatever the case might be, some sort of robustness type exercises if they're injury prone, whatever. And then likewise with your least fit players who their fitness is a limiting factor for their performance, you probably need to do some extra work with them. So whether that means micro-dosing across your 3 sessions of the week, getting them to do an extra 5 minutes each session, or giving them a handy aerobic session to do on their own. So like there's literally, especially in the pre-season period and the early stages of the year, there's nothing wrong with giving somebody a handy half-hour jog or even a handy half-hour of off-feet conditioning. Because as long as it's handy in that way, it's not going to interfere with their recovery from any other training. It's not going to interfere with their performance in training. It will, if anything, help their recovery. And the fitter a player is, the more they're going to recover between sessions, the more they're going to recover between bouts of exertion, so reps on the pitch or whatever the case is. So it's not just a limiting factor from a performance point of view, it's also a limiting factor for the standards of training, like how intensely can you train. Again, getting back to that point, the whole point is not the whole point, but a big why for S&C, if you're looking for one, would be to allow your team to train at a higher level consistently, so yeah, I would say that just try to do some sort of assessment, try cater to the various groups that you have within the squad, and then just keep it simple.
Mm-hmm. And try and, I suppose, from a coaching point of view, try and keep the intensity of the drills up and make sure the lads are working hard, and you get a good conditioning blast through that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Conor, look, at this stage of the podcast with all the other guests, I'm fascinated by kind of all different coaches, different perspectives. We're kind of all generally heading on the same journey, but there's so many different ways of getting there. So I have a few questions that I've asked all the different guests that I'm going to throw out your way as well, and just see your perspective on it. So the first one, who is the person you've worked with who has influenced your coaching style the most?
Yeah, I think this was a hard one to sort of, well, when I came to the answer, it was probably fairly obvious, but I probably had never sat down to probably think about this. But so I mentioned a friend of mine, Dahi, earlier on. So we boxed together. We both started out our coaching careers together. He went off to Australia for a bit, so he was over the other side of the world for quite a few years. But we both sort of, kept pushing on in our own S&C careers. He's back over here now, thankfully. But even when he was over in Australia, we would have spoke to each other all the time. Every time we get together, we just talk about training the whole time, about coaching the whole time. Our approaches to S&C are very similar, but still with enough distinction that we do challenge each other's thoughts, challenge each other's thinking. But certainly he'd be probably the most influential, and that's from us talking about what we're seeing that we don't agree with to what we're seeing that we think was a great idea. We've gone up and down the breadth of the country doing different workshops and courses together. So certainly, and we still talk to each other every week. He's with the Meath footballers now this year. So two sort of similar setups from, I suppose, a standards point of view and everything else between Meath footballers, Westmeath Hurlers. So we're very much in the same boat once again, and it's nice to have him to sort of bounce ideas off and to chat to every week. But certainly, I suppose he has been the most influential and continues to be the most influential sort of the person on my coaching. And other than that, maybe I had a guy here named Andy that was working for me. Unfortunately, he's travelling now, but he's back in May. And likewise, the same thing. I could be doing a bit of work in the gym. He comes in to do a training session. And next thing I know, the both of us lost 90 minutes because we've been chatting about training and different stuff like that. So they are very much peers. I can't say I've had too much of a mentoring relationship with anybody, unfortunately. But certainly, I think just speaking with people that I consider to be, my coaching peers, and sure, I couldn't shut that off if I wanted. It's one of the things that I love to do when I get out together with other coaches and stuff But yeah, definitely, I suppose Dai has been the most influential.
Yeah, look, it's a common theme across the shows that we've done, is that peer learning and kind of having that peer support group is so important. But it's important that we don't suffer from groupthink as well, as you said, that you're different enough that you're going to challenge each other. And we have a peer group where we've kind of 4 coaches that are in different levels of the GA and different experience and stuff like that. So it's great to have just different perspectives, and it keeps you kind of thinking. And that's great to look when you have problems and stuff like that as well. Coaching can be a lonely place, there isn't too many people you can turn to. You can't really turn, it's people who don't know what they're doing. So it's great to have that support there as well, that you can kind of bounce things off of. Tell me, Conor, what does the day of a training session look like for you? And just walk me through the outline of a usual session. What kind of prep you do, or so even if you want to use Westmeath as an example at the moment, kind of like what kind of meetings do you have before training and that kind of stuff at the moment when you're, I suppose, in that pre-season phase?
Okay, yeah. So there is a bit of a difference between gym and pitch. So let's say we would have had a gym session earlier on this week. That would start with, I'll flick through the programs really, really quickly, basically to make sure everything's done. I'll go through all the various individuals then, so there would be individual changes needed for different players based on, like say this time of year, we have players involved with college, we have players who are coming back from injuries, we have players who, because I'm getting to know the team, different things are popping up that I'm thinking this player would actually do better with this or that, or they have spoken to me about something that they'd rather. So all those individual changes will be taking place across the day. There'll usually be some sort of communications going back and forth between me and players and coaches and the manager and stuff like that throughout the day as well. So all of that is happening in the lead up. On the way down, then I'll usually get there a bit early before gym sessions, especially this time of year. There's some sort of testing taking place with small groups of players. So I'll get 3 or 4 players to come in, and we'll get some jump profiling done in the half an hour before the gym session starts. I'll usually write down a few of the key points that I want to make at the little brief at the start. So what's the context for the session? Where's the program going this week and why? Any other things that I might want to point out at, good things, bad things, or anything else like that, just from a coaching point of view and addressing the group. And then, we'll usually just get into the gym session then. After the gym session then, I'll speak to the manager. Usually on the way home, me and the manager might even send a couple of voice notes back and forth because whatever we've spoken about hasn't properly finished. And then, you're trying to sort of, I suppose, take your learnings from that session, or what you want to change, or what you want to tweak, or what you want to do going forward. And obviously, well, for me, the last couple of teams I've been involved with gym sessions have been on a Monday. So the next day, once you're leaving the gym session, you're already trying to get ready for the pitch session the next day on the Tuesday. Then for a pitch session, I suppose really the only key differences would be much more contact with players who are rehabbing or injured, and much more contact then with the physios. Once the GPS system and the reporting system there is up and running, there's going to be a lot of, making sure that you've checked the acute chronic workload ratios, you've checked the wellness questionnaires and everything, so there's nothing flagging from any players. And then, like I said, getting in there as early as possible, trying to touch base with the physio as early as possible, because the physiotherapist might need to let you know about 1 or 2 players that might have an issue or two. And then also, more often than not, the physiotherapist isn't involved in the planning of the session. So I would usually go in and tell the physio, look, this is a change of direction heavy session, or this is a high speed running heavy session. We've, a couple of conditioning blocks mixed in with, these hurling elements, whatever the case is. So the physio is aware, then they can speak to whatever players come into them and tell them, well, look, you can do the warm-up, you can do the first conditioning block, you can step out of the small-sided game, but you can red bib yourself for the open-ended game at the end, or whatever the case is. So try and get all that stuff ticked off, go out and set up on the pitch, come back, meet all the coaches and stuff, make sure the plan that we had in place from whatever the days or weeks previous is still the plan that night. Obviously things change and you need to roll with that. And then same thing again, pitch session will start. Pitch sessions will probably be not any busier than I would be in the gym, but it's a little bit more chaotic in that you're trying to bounce between doing your stuff with the team, whether it's the warm up and the speed block, and then you're trying to bounce, get over and set up for the group conditioning block while you're trying to help the rehab people do their bit of conditioning or running or whatever the case is. So you're sort of flying around quite a bit in the pitch session. If I'm available, then if I'm doing nothing, then for any sort of portion of it, I would go over to wherever the drill is taking place and try to. I suppose back in the day, I probably used to look a lot more at technique and mechanics and try to, give people pointers on how they are running or changing direction. I tend to do less and less of that as I go on. I don't know if that's because there is quite a bit of research coming out showing that it's. The more expert somebody thinks they are in that, the more likely they are to be wrong. So I try to focus most of if I'm looking at a drill or whatever, I try to focus most of my coaching on that physical element. So really the tackling, players harassing each other, players getting contact on each other. So I try to, keep my eye on that as much as possible. Try to pick out, with that, I would certainly be trying to pick out movement patterns and, how they set their feet, how they position their body. And then also, is there anything I can take away from watching them doing in a natural setting that I could try and add into a manufactured drill that would help them with their tackling technique or with improving their strength and their power in the tackle. So that's pretty much it. Cool down at the end, then debrief with the coaching team, the managers. There's usually quite a bit to speak about after a pitch session from a point of view of, trying to identify any player standing out ahead of a game, or how the session in itself went, what changes you make next time, how the team are going in a general sense, all that sort of stuff. Then the same thing again on the way home, plenty of voice notes, maybe a phone call or two, and just trying to make sure you take the learnings from that session with you and that you're already organising for the next session to come then.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the old voice notes now. I love taking the pin out of the grenade with an old voice note and seeing what comes back.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
It's really interesting what you say there about the technique, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and it's kind of like at a certain level, if you have a player there is 28, 29 playing inter-county hurling, and this comes from a technical point of view with hurling as well, is like, you could see maybe their swing isn't as pure as another guy, or their technique isn't maybe what a traditionalist might think it is, but it's effective for them. Is like, is there going to be any benefit in working on this guy to change that? Like if you look at golf, it's just accepted that, like they talk about different people's swings, whereas in hurling we seem to be kind of maybe caught up a little bit on having a certain technique and a certain way to hit the ball, that there kind of any variability on that is maybe seen as wrong. Whereas it's very interesting to hear that about the running technique now. It's kind of like, look, if it's working for them, it's working for them to a certain extent, kind of a.
Now obviously there are certain things you definitely don't want to see, but I mean there's a bandwidth of sort of acceptability there, and within that, then you're not trying to fasten yourself too much to any sort of one way of changing direction, especially changing direction, because it's so chaotic. Like a player is usually changing direction to go and do some other task, and not just changing direction for the sake of it. So whatever other task they're about to do is probably preoccupying them. If they're changing direction to turn around and try and get a flick or a block, or try and get away from somebody and get the ball off, they have to be aware of all these other things that are going around them. So, you coming up and grabbing them by the arm and saying, listen, when you're coming in there, maybe you should try and get a little bit lower, or whatever the case. That's all well and good, but I think at the end of the day, especially with speed-related stuff like running and change of direction, you're trying to improve the player's physiology to be more powerful, faster at those particular movement patterns. But it is very much a physiological-based thing. And then mechanics will usually look after themselves then. And look, they're all different shapes, sizes. There's all sorts of things going on inside that we can't see as well. So, as long as they're getting faster or they're doing it without getting injured, that's the main thing there, I think.
Yeah, I like that phrase, the bandwidth of acceptability. I think I'm going to adopt that one. I like it. So what are your 3 non-negotiables for any team you're involved in?
So I don't think I'm not sure I have any non-negotiables as such, but for me, they nearly come back to sort of me as a person and what I have going on and stuff like that. So one of them is definitely a schedule. So I need to know, literally 2 months. I don't need to know time. I don't need to know location, but I need to have a fair idea of what evenings of the week things are going to be taking place, and as much as possible for that to just stay the same. I'm a big believer in rhythm and pattern. I think human beings, we've evolved to live our lives based on a particular rhythm and a pattern. So I think trying to ingrain that in our training as well makes sense, rather than sort of hopping all over the place. Or if we have a game on a Saturday, we do this. But if we have a game on a Sunday, we do this. If it's Sunday morning, we'll change everything around the following week. If it's Sunday evening, we'll change everything around the following week. If it's Saturday morning, we'll keep everything as is. So I'm a big believer in keeping that rhythm the whole time. And for me, running a business, being involved with other teams and everything else, it's important for me to be able to do any sort of half-decent job that there's a clear schedule there and a well-organised setup, basically. Other than that, then, is I suppose having more and more, the most important thing for me is the most important factor for me to having any sort of success or any feeling like I can do any sort of good work with a team is the manager. So having some belief in the manager, not from a point of view of, is this manager going to take us all the way or whatever the case is, but that this manager is going to be the manager for me and that I am going to be the S&C coach for this manager, so that we can work together, that we are aligned, that we'll challenge each other in the right ways, I suppose. But more importantly, that they will sort of they will put together a setup, so a backroom team, other personnel, logistics, time and everything else that will allow me to do the best job possible. So that's hugely important for me now.
When you step away from a team, Conor, what 3 things would you like the players to say about you?
Yeah, so a fairly heavy one, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose. Well, first and foremost, I suppose that I cared about their progression as athletes. So, and I'm sure. Look, there are probably players that I've worked with before that maybe don't hold me in the highest regard. I hope not, but I mean, human nature would be, people don't always gel personally, and that can get in the way of professional relationships as well. But I think for the most part, or I'd be confident that for the most part, I've always gotten along with players. I've always forged good relationships with players. There's lots of players that I would have worked with in the past that I still keep in touch with to this day. But I think for the main thing is you're there to do a job as an S&C coach. Your job is to try and develop them physically so that they can better play their game or better reach their potential as players. So that would be first and foremost the thing that I'd most like for them to say about me, was that I perform my role as an S&C coach. After that, then I suppose would be that I was a nice person, that they enjoyed being around me, that even if we didn't always see eye to eye, that they would have understood me as a person and that I understood them as a person, and that we would have always understood we were striving for a common goal, and that ultimately they would have admiration for me as a person. That's important. And then I suppose most importantly, and probably underpinning both of those things, is that if they were to say they would gladly work with me again, then that's the best possible sort of the best testimonial you could get from a player, so those 3 things, I think.
Yeah, and come rain, hail or shine, the man will be in shorts. That's what most teams say about you as well.
You know what? So I would have a different a little different quirk probably, and these are never usually conscious sort of decisions, but some sort of little different quirk that sort of reveals itself over the course of a season with different squads. So yeah, with Dublin Camogie, it was that I don't think I ever wore a pair of trousers. I wore shorts. Now, to be fair, we had a particularly mild winter that year. We had one evening I remember where it was lashing snow, and I was regretting that I was wearing shorts. That we were.
You'd already committed to it at that stage. It had become a thing at that stage. There was no going back.
Well, this is the trouble. That's why I haven't done it since, because once you commit to that, you are stuck to it. Like, you know, my reputation for shorts preceded me. So I don't know what the quirk is with Westmeath this year, but there is always something with every squad anyway. But that was certainly.
There's plenty of quirks in Westmeath. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, there's a guy down Limerick here, Dara Droog, and any match you go to, it could be -7, and he won't even be wearing socks, man. He'll have a pair of running shorts on, boots on, no socks. He's just I'd be looking.
That's a hardy man there, yeah.
S&C coaches are a different breed, man. I just you see me in the biggest, warmest jacket you can get. That's my non-negotiable with any team, is that I need the warmest jacket you can possibly find for me. But so a question, Conor. You said the last one was deep. I think this one is quite deep as well, and I think I've said before in the show that this was a question that kind of stopped me in my tracks when I was asked it myself a few years ago. What's your coaching ethos?
Yeah, that is a deep one. Yeah. I probably don't sit down and sort of, reflect on this stuff as much as I should, because when you do, it gives you a bit of, I suppose, renewed focus or energy or, direction or clarity about how you're doing things. So, but certainly, I think one of the most important things, and something that I do try to do often, is that whole thing of know thyself. So I try to understand myself first and foremost as a person, and I try to, as much as I can, see myself from other people's perspectives. So that, I suppose, helps you be more empathetic with other people, I suppose. But then it also it helps you understand, maybe if you have some blind spots, you'll be able to better see them or see them a little bit more fully. And just to, I suppose, get a better idea of how to comport yourself, how to communicate with people, how to move through the world, move through squads, or move through your job as a personality. I'm very slaggable, obviously, because a lot of my friends and stuff would I'm the butt of the joke with loads of people. They love people for some reason around me, love doing impressions of me as well. But one of the things I notice all the time when people do impressions of me is, obviously, they put on the deep voice, they put on nearly a bit of an angry demeanour, they furrow their brow, that sort of stuff. So I obviously have a bit of a resting prick face. So when I'm working with squads initially at the start, I try to be, as much as possible, definitely more bubbly than I am as a person. I try to be as disarming as I can, so that people are comfortable around me. Even let any sort of nerdiness that I have in me show and stuff like that. I suppose try and be a bit more vulnerable, so that people would be comfortable being around me, and that they won't be guarded around me, and that they'll hopefully see that, again, like, I'm getting back to that point, that I'm there to try and do a job for them, like, and that they can trust me, and that I have integrity. The reasons I'm there have integrity, let's say. So yeah, I suppose know thyself would be one of them, or the main one, and that goes across all sorts of coaching. So if I'm doing, if you're in a PT setting, or you're with a big squad, if it's under 11s, or if it's an intercounty team, and that would mean then, and that is the nature of coaching, I suppose, is that you wear many different types of masks. So how I am with an under 13 girls team is not going to be the same with how I am with a senior men's team or an intercounty men's team. You're always revealing different parts of yourself and hiding different parts of yourself, I suppose, in an effort to do the best job possible, and in an effort to create relationships with people and that sort of thing. So that's the big one. And then I suppose certainly with intercounty or with the more elite teams, and I suppose this is an ethos. It's not really an ethos, but I don't believe in catering, and this is going to sound mean, but I don't believe in catering to the lowest common denominator. I don't mean that at all in a mean way, but what I mean is especially as an S&C coach, probably more so for physiotherapists, but certainly S&C coaches get very, very caught up in the individual player. This player is injured, so we need to do this. These two players are overloaded, so we need to do this. But ultimately, you're there to drive a big collective of 30 plus people on. Lots of that, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. You can't win an inter-county championship, I don't believe, without training on the edge, teetering between that point of doing, just enough and a little bit too much. You have to live in that little zone there, so when you're there for a collective, I think it's important then that you do what's best for the collective as much as possible or at all times. So that would mean, and what I'm getting at here is, if there are players there, let's say you're always going to have a couple of players that are prone to hamstring injuries or are a little bit more prone to this type of injury, or they have hip issues or whatever the case is. But that doesn't mean that you can go and wholesale change your session to suit those two players. So if it means you pull two players out of a section of the session, that's fine. But as much as possible, you're trying to do the best training you can with the collective of trainers that you have. So I suppose you could call it lowest common denominator in that sense, in that you're not trying to lower your training standards to these people that would otherwise hold you back because they're injured or whatever the case is. But on the flip side of that, like what you were saying earlier on about dropping your training intensity after a championship match, you only have 14. You don't even have anywhere near 14 players that have played a full two halves of a match. So not slipping into, moving our gym session on a Monday because, the lads are tired after the match. Yeah, well, maybe 13 players or 12 players are tired after the match, but there's a huge cohort of other players there that didn't get any work or didn't get enough work. And they're the ones that are important to keep driving on, to keep the whole thing pushing on. You don't like, I know you're saying of you don't perform to the level of your ability, you fall to the level of your training. In much the same way, I think you don't perform to the level of your best players. You fall probably to the level of your back 15, let's say. So you need to keep them driving on. You need to keep them pushing the front players. You need to keep them engaged, feeling like they have something to train for and that sort of stuff. So that'd be a big one for me with a squad as well, is to always try and cater for the group that is available to train and to train in the fullest capacity, and not try to limit ourselves. And it can be very, very hard. I know from even experience with the club team this year, we had lots of lads off at college and with the under-20 panel and with the senior county panel. And we just ended up, we were playing Leinster League and playing Dublin League club matches. And we were just running into injuries, falling short on players. And you get into a loop then of doing training sessions that are, you're trying to mind people in training as much as possible, trying not to do too much speed work in case you get a hamstring injury, whatever the case is. And then, 2 months further down the line, you have this, unfortunately, detrained squad that as an S&C coach, you probably should have been figuring out some other way to try and drive them on the whole time. It is very, very hard, but that is something that I try to bear in mind as much as possible as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things there, I suppose, Conor. It's like you're kind of saying, without paraphrasing now, you kind of fake it sometimes with teams. I think for coaches coming in or listening to this, sometimes you have to fake it as a coach on the field as well, as in from an energy point of view. I'm a big believer that the head coach or the manager should be setting the tone energy-wise. And some days you could have had a stinker of a day at work, you might be late coming out of the office or something like that, and you're rocking down the train, you're like, geez, there's anywhere I'd rather be than here now, but you just simply can't bring that negative energy into the group or the session will be wasted. And you do have to kind of put on a performance sometime as a coach where you're on the tips of your toes and you're giving it everything. So it might come as a surprise some people when they hear it saying, you have to put on a different personality to a certain extent or fake it sometimes with a group to make it work. But you kind of do, you kind of have to try and bring them on the journey initially. I think over time, your natural personality and character will invariably come through anyway. But you do kind of have to fake it a little bit sometimes. And
it's not inauthentic. It's not like it's not like you're being fake even though you're using the term you have to fake it. It's that you're trying to, for me, I would consider myself a bit of an introverted person. but you have to put yourself out there to sort of address the squad in the first place. But also, like I said, to disarm people around you and to make people comfortable around you. You can't be shut off. You can't be this sort of this quiet, sort of reserved person. So I have to sort of put on a bit more of a personality. But it is actually very easy to do because this is my passion. So working with athletes and teams is my passion. It's very easy for me to go from being an introvert person to having lots of extrovert qualities when I need it because it's for one thing, it's for something that I'm incredibly passionate about, but it's to serve a purpose that it is a pure purpose in the end. It's not like there's no malice behind sort of any pretense that you might put on,
No, that's very interesting. So this is probably the time you've been waiting for, Conor. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. You can hit me with any 3 questions you want, and maybe I'll find out from these 3 questions whether I treated you well in Dublin or not. We'll see what comes down the line.
Yeah, well, I'll go with the deepest one first. So the other 2 are probably a little bit more lighthearted anyway. And I suppose this one follows on from what we were just speaking about. But what aspects of your own personality or your own character do you feel you need to minimize, or you need to shut off, or you need to hide away from people in order to be the most effective coach you can? So sort of I suppose along the same lines of what we were just discussing, but for your point of view, what are the things that you sort of you keep hidden away because you need to do a job?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this much, but when and obviously like we do pre-prepare these questions, so like when you said,
well, not too early now, I sent these on to you late enough.
I know. I really started thinking about it. So I think one of my big strengths as a manager is that I'm a warrior. In that you're talking about scheduling there, and what time is the bus leaving, and what are we doing, and everything, and opposition prep and everything. I love to have all that stuff boxed off. Like, it's like, I think it's a huge strength of mine. But I suppose you can't come into a dressing room then and let your natural warrior shine out like that. You kind of have to put forward a kind of a calm, cool exterior to players, because you don't want to be coming into the dressing room going, right, lads, has the caterer definitely come, Joe? Are we on time? Is the warmer? Where's Conor? Who's setting up the cones? What's he doing? So you kind of have to just go, right, shut all that down. And look, a lot of that comes from trusting the people working around you as well. That, once you, like you said, routines, once you get into the routine, by the time we finished up with Dublin, like, it was just a case, you just rock on into the dressing room. You just knew everything was going to be there. The dressing room was set up, everything was there. So that helps as well. And I suppose my natural coaching style on the pitch is really high energy, energetic, probably borderline manic. Colin Codd says I'm 95% intensity, 5% technique. So like, that's fine on the training ground, but you can't be like that on the sideline then, because like, you'll just wind your own players up. You get referees offside, stuff like that. So I suppose I've worked an awful lot, and would have worked a lot with Paul Ahern just trying to be cool and calm on the line, and different like kind of little mental preps and techniques and stuff like that, just to hide my natural, I suppose, fieriness. It does come out sometimes, but I think more often than not, if you keep it cool, calm and collected 9 times out of 10, you're far better off. You're able to make better decisions and stuff like that. So yeah, my natural worry mentality and my fireness are kind of 2 things I kind of have to keep in check to help me perform a little bit better, I suppose.
Yeah, very good stuff. Will I move on? Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
Or if I haven't answered the question well enough for you, I mean, you can delve further if you want.
I'm just wondering, at what stage when I was with you did you ever shut that personality trait off?
It's actually after I worked with you, I
think. Okay. Yeah, so a nice one. So what movie has most impacted you as a coach? So not a book or anything, specifically a movie.
Yeah, this is interesting. I was going to go with Jerry Maguire or Space Jam or something like that. But funnily enough, I actually read the book as well, but I did watch the film. Was The Damned United. So Brian Clough. And like, he obviously was an incredibly successful manager. He could only dream of being as successful as he ever was. But he did some bananas things purely fueled by ego that actually kind of really cost him during his career. So like I think when he took over as, or when he was with Derby after they won the after they won the league, he had such a rivalry with Don Revie that he played a full team against them in a league match that didn't matter 3 days before they played Juventus in the European Cup semi-final. So I just thought, like, this was a guy who was putting his ego and his want to just pull one over on another lad completely ahead of the best interest of the team. So I think there's a massive learning in that, like, you know, it's always the team first. It's never about you. And I know people think there's kind of this cult of the manager and the ego and all this. Genuinely isn't. Any successful manager, I can guarantee you, is putting everything ahead of himself. I think that's a massive learning from that. But then, like, also, I suppose I used to kind of, early in my coaching career, I'd go into a team and I'd have a set style in my head and I'd be like, right, this is how we're going to play hurling, guys. And you're kind of going nearly like, I'm going to teach these lads how to hurl now. And like, you really don't do that. Like the saying back our ways, you don't need to teach them to suck eggs. Like you're just kind of, you're trying to get things organized and do things a little bit different. But like Clough made that mistake. Like he went into the Leeds United dressing room and was like, right, guys, I know you've won everything the last couple of years, but like you were a disgrace, you were filthy, you've done it the wrong way, throw your medals away, and that kind of stuff. I was like, Jesus. So there's a learning there as a coach as well, is that when you take over a team, and especially one that's been fairly successful, like your first 30 days should be just about getting to know lads and getting a feel for the place and kind of go, right, well, maybe I could make a small bit of an improvement there, or geez, they're really good at this, let's make sure that we don't lose this in the transition from manager to manager or whatever, and not go in and accuse lads of being cheats and tell them to throw their medals in the bin and stuff like that. So yeah. Look, it's a great story, the Damned United, but it's actually quite interesting. There's a lot you could take away on what not to do. And I suppose there's a lesson in that in itself. Is as successful as Clough was, he made loads of mistakes as well. So that's a really interesting one. Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot with a follow-up?
You can?
Right. So now they don't have to be obviously have impacted you, but even that, can you think of any films that aren't sports-based films, but that might still provide lessons to coaching, let's say? So it doesn't have to be one that impacted you to a great degree, but even just on the spot, can you think of any?
Jeez, that's interesting. Like,
so that's what I try to. Yeah, when I tried to think of it, when I thought of this question, I tried to think of a few that weren't sports related, like, you know, so what because the sports related ones are probably the more obvious ones, you know.
Yeah, like, I suppose you know yourself, like sport is so political. Like the GA is a political animal in the background. So if you're watching Succession lately, and very just good, all the maneuvering and the politics and everything going on in the background, you've been nearly taking notes, going, "Geez, this is how you deal with a county board, or this is how you deal with a club committee, or whatever." Yeah. So, like, I think it depends. For me, it depends on what time of the year I'm watching something, right? So, like, if it's October, November, and it's been a long season or whatever, I'll just sit on the couch and I'll go, I'm just going to veg out here now, and I have no interest. It just needs to entertain me for an hour and a half and get a laugh out of it or whatever. But then, and I'm definitely in that mode at the moment now, I think a switch kind of flips in your head where all of a sudden everything you're doing, you're nearly pulling something out of it going, geez, that was interesting. Like, and you'd be writing stuff down. Like, I wonder, could I use that with a team? Or, you know, like it's kind of, if you're in a restaurant and maybe their process isn't right and they brought out the meal in the wrong order, you're going, oh, geez, they need to improve their processes here, kind of stuff. You know? Yeah. I think for me, I don't know, like, I'm not a huge film guy, I'm more of a book guy, so it's a really hard question, but I think it depends on the time of the year. At certain times of the year, I could pull a learning for coaching out of anything, and then at other times of the year, I just trying to switch off and have no interest in this. It's kind of purely entertainment. But tough question. I probably haven't answered it very well, but
no, you have. Succession was a good answer. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Succession, like, there's so many lessons in that, even like when you look at like the relationships between the family members and everything that you could apply to even a team setting, like, you know. Yeah,
and like when we were talking about Club GA earlier, like, you know, you're starting to get, there's 5 or 6 brothers and cousins on a team and stuff like that, and it's always good. It's a funny story actually. I managed Armoured Rovers, no, not Armoured, Jesus, I get shot. Galtee Rovers in Tipperary when I was really, really young. I was only about 24. I ended up managing a senior football team, and we played Aherlow in the first round of the West Tip Championship. Aherlow and Galtee Rovers are neighbours, like, and there was a huge row in it. These 2 lads in particular absolutely boxed the heads off each other. And it was all separate anyway. Game finished up. I'm not sure if we won or lost, to be honest. I think we might have won by a point. I know it was Liam Kearns, Lord mercy him, he's passed away. I know it was maybe manager of Aherlow at the time, can't remember. But anyways, game was over after and we were kind of finished up, whatever. And I see the 2 boys that boxed the head off each other sitting into the same car, dressed to the nines in suits. 2 first cousins off their wedding. I was like, holy shit. So yeah, you're talking about succession, like these two boys.
Yeah.
And you know what? They probably
Well,
went
there
at
you
it
go.
again at the wedding after 7 or 8 points later on. I wouldn't know. Yeah, I
You
won't
should have
name them
followed
though,
them
but
to
I'd
that
say
wedding.
if there's anyone from West Tip listed though, they'll be able to figure out who the two boys were fairly handy enough, I'd say. But yeah, madness.
Okay, good stuff. Right, so last one. So it's All Ireland final day. You've managed a team to the All Ireland final, or you've coached a team. You've managed or coached. I don't mind, right? So you've been involved at a high level in the backroom team. They've made it to an All Ireland final. So tell me about your ideal morning before you go and meet up with the team. And what I'm getting at more so is obviously I don't need to know about you brushing your teeth or having your shower or anything, but anything that you might do that's different because of the day that's in it. So what are the little things that you'd sort of, and I suppose trying to see, would you be somebody who tries to make the most of that morning? Obviously you're going to do your bits of work that you need to do, but tries to make the most and enjoys the morning, or do you get caught up and try to, worry too much about that sort of stuff? So
no, it's very, very interesting. Yeah. Like very, very, very interesting. I suppose because like go back to what I said earlier about being a warrior, like, but like I love to have that Thursday night management meeting and your scenario sheets and everything, and I like you send a few communication messages, logistics messages on a Friday. I like to wake up on a Saturday, or if it's a Sunday for a game, obviously Sunday for an Ireland shows how few Ireland finals I've been involved in. Sunday morning for a game with everything boxed off. So I do try and enjoy the morning. No, obviously it depends if you're staying in a hotel or that, but I do remember being in a hotel for an Ashbourne final, because the semi-final was the same weekend, and just feeling completely, suffocated by the whole experience, that I couldn't get out and just get out of the bubble and stuff like that. But obviously, look, when we were with Dublin, I used to just love getting up early, going for the breakfast, having an absolute feed, carbon up so you could ball referees out of it, but then stay calm so you wouldn't. Big feed of pancakes, bacon, maple syrup, heap of coffee, and then just love that. I suppose I love that initial period where the players are starting to arrive and you're just kind of having the chats and everyone's in kind of great form and nobody is really focused on the game just yet. And then I do, like, for the whole morning of the game, as much as you possibly can, try not to think about it. But if we played a few big games at Dublin, it's like when we were going to Croke Park, it's like when you see that first glimpse of Croke Park up over the houses and you're coming down through Drumcondra, it's kind of like, woof, it kind of starts to hit in then, right? Like we're getting in game mode here now and that. But look, walk out on the pitch then and just have a look around and get a feel for the place. And maybe about 90 minutes beforehand, then you're kind of going, right, you gather the troops here, gather the management, last kind of chat through the scenarios, and you kind of get the game face on. But look, as much as possible, and look, the bigger the game, the harder it is to keep it out of your head. But as much as possible, I do try and enjoy the morning of big games and go for breakfast. You were at plenty of those breakfasts as well, Conor. We had a few regular spots around Clondalkin that we used to go to.
Nobody else, though. Nobody
else.
Oh, come here. Before we would have even met up then for a breakfast, are you doing anything that morning to distract yourself? Do you read? Are you somebody that goes and does a bit of meditation or breathing, or are you?
Yeah, walking usually. Yeah. If we're down here in Limerick, I'll usually go down to UL if it's a game that's close by or whatever, and just go for a stroll around the campus and try on a few tunes or whatever. But like, it is hard to kind of just, like, yourself, when you're involved in something that nearly consumes you. Like it's hard going, and like you'd be trying to avoid maybe going home as well. Like, because my old lad is mad into it. And she'd be going home and the old lad would be asking you about it and the mother would be asking you about it, and
Imagine how the players feel, the ones that are still living at home. It must be very tough on them to sort of,
very tough. And especially, like, when they're if they go down to their club for a puck around or whatever, and every fella below is asking them, well, how are you fixed for Saturday and how are you going? Geez, you're going great, best of luck and all. And it kind of like, I even see, obviously, with Anna here, like, we barely talk about GA, like, because sure, every time we leave the house, someone's asking you about it. So the last thing you want is be sitting down watching Succession. Well, are you playing wing forward or midfield the weekend, or what's the crack? It's like that.
And even for me, I like say when I'm at home, before I've done anything, I like getting up early and having actually just time to myself and make a coffee at home and sit there either in silence or I might have something that I don't want to watch on in the background of the TV, and it's literally just time to sit there, maybe try and enjoy the coffee, like, and enjoy that bit of quietness and stuff before. Because even when we would have met up and had breakfast and stuff, we're talking about the game. So even though we're relaxing and we're trying to enjoy that little bit of a moment, it's still you're still semi in game mode by that stage, like, so something nice and quiet on my own was always be a nice way to start the day and make sure that your mind is right and the energy levels and everything else is right as well.
No, that's it. Like, it's important to know that Paul Ahern is going to be the last guest on the series, and he's doing a PhD at the moment that I'm very interested in about, like, how coaches and managers can prepare themselves, right, for performing on match day, and for training sessions. And he interviewed before. He interviewed a load of coaches, but part of it, I hope there's no GDPR around this though, but part of it is that there's going to be an actual, like, a method of training coaches. So, like, there's nothing really there to train you mentally. So there'll actually be a training sessions that you can go through to prepare yourself mentally for games. So it kind of goes back into your match day prep and all this. So it's definitely something we'll expand on with Paul, as long as I haven't, like, broken any GDPR or anything here now. I'm pretty sure I did sign something before I did the interview, so I hope I'm not in trouble. But I think it's something I really believe in, like, even from a fueling point of view, which I'd be laughing there, but I think, like, fueling up properly for the day so that, like, you're able to make decisions that you're actually not like, that you have your brain power
anything that will upset your stomach or anything else like that. That sort of stuff comes into it. There are nerves there, regardless of what like, I would always consider S&C is a tertiary type of role. Like, so if the team can take to the field without the S&C coach, they can't take to the field without their gear, so they need the kit man. They can't take to the field without haven't been managed to that position in the first place by the manager. They can't take to the field without having the skills of the game, but they could conceivably take to the field without the S&C coach. So I don't put myself up there as being this important figure in any sort of background, but even at that, the nerves that I would feel on the day of an important game, like, you would have to sort of mind what you're eating and make sure that you're not going to give yourself an upset stomach on the coach on the way to the game. That's the last thing you need.
I don't know. I suppose it comes down to ego a little bit as well, but, like, it definitely being, say, if I'm the head coach or it says use the S&C coach, you don't feel as much pressure, right? Obviously, you're as invested in it as everybody else, but I think when you're the manager and you're the guy on the sideline, and when it's in Dublin, we are Dublin are writing the articles, and it's like it's Adrian O'Sullivan's Dublin, and it's like whether it's been good or bad, then the next sentence follows that,
Well, that's the other thing, and you have when you're with an intercounty setup, you're the manager with an intercounty setup, you have to contend with, you have to do media before and after and all this other stuff that sort of adds, I suppose, to the stress of the day and to the nerves of the day. I wouldn't have appreciated that before, I'm sorry.
The funny story with I don't think I've ever told this in public, but we played Waterford in the championship my first year with Dublin up in Parnell Park, and we'd beaten them about 3 weeks previously in the league playoff, and they absolutely pummeled us. Like, it was horrendous, like 318 to 7 points or something. They absolutely destroyed us. And afterwards, this guy came over and he asked me to do an interview, and I think it was Jerome Quinn's brothers, Jerome, that does the recording. So I was waiting, and they interviewed everyone before they came to me. So I'm fuming now. It's roasting, and we've been pummeled. Like, so he comes over and he says, "Okay, could you say your name for the camera?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Is it like?" I was kind of looking around, going, "Is this like, is this a wind up?" It's like, "You've just like I've banished door across my front here. You've just literally asked me for an interview." And I was like, "No." So he says, look, tough day at the office, but at least you get to play it down next week." I was like, "Sorry?" I was like, "Yeah, at least you get to play it down next week." I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Sure, you look after them handy enough." And, like, they're obviously from Northern Ireland or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, "Are you serious?" I said, like, down, like, lost to Waterford by a point. We've just lost to Cork by a point. We've just been pummeled. Like, on what planet are we favourites? He says, okay. But at least you must be happy with the work rate. And I just went bananas with him. I was like, "Are you for real?" I said, "We've just got hammered. Like, we've been absolutely useless. We've just spoken in the huddle about how our work rate wasn't enough." I was like, "What game are you actually watching?" He's like, "Thanks very much." And that was it. I was going to email Jerome Quinn the other day going, "You don't have that footage by any chance, do you?" Because, like, I'd love to watch it back. But that was just the pressure of everything. Like, it was just everything just exploded. You're kind of going, you're the manager of the county team. you've just been hammered, like big crowd there, like the expectations were high because we'd beaten them in the league, and next thing this guy is just going, and you're like, and it just went poof. So it's like, yeah. So the pressure is different. Like, you don't, as you said, as the S&C coach, as the head coach, as the sports psychologist, you never have to deal with any of these things. But like, look, there's a learning in that as well.
And even at that, like,
same, when you're beaten.
yeah. But I mean, the same thing again. Like, as in, I'm thinking, even when I'm trying to, I suppose, empathize with you there and say, oh yeah, it must be very hard to stress. I'm not even considering you getting stupid questions. That's me just thinking about you getting normal questions. So when somebody comes at you with that sort of stuff as well, then
when we played Wexford last year, remember they scored 2-1 in the first 5 minutes. We were 7 points down after 5 minutes. And your man goes, so you conceded 2-1 in the first 5 minutes. Were you worried? Like, I was, yeah. How the fuck could you not be worried? Like, in a must-win game, you're 7 points down after 5 minutes. You're leaking goals. Like, that was, yeah. What's the next question? Will you follow?
They're expecting you to do the usual sort of management thing. I'm just saying, look, we had full faith in the game plan, and
Paul Ahern, our sports psychologist, actually spoke in the dressing room about being 7 points down early and leaking goals. So we kind of reacted as we thought we would to that, you know. Stop, look. Sometimes you just love to shake lads and go, come on, boys. So you really ask for this. But, look, Conor, last question. This has been excellent. Last question. 20 years' time, you hang up it says whistle here, but you hang up the whistle and the shorts for the last time. Is there one achievement you'd like to have in the bag?
Like, the answer to that is no, I don't think so. I suppose, look, with it, because they're all for an S&C coach, is very much around that sort of development piece. You know, you can hang your hat on other successes, other than whether you've achieved, you know, let's say an All-Ireland win or whatever the case is. Now, obviously, it's incredibly frustrating if you're with a team and they're going the wrong way, even despite your best efforts as an S&C coach. But that comes down to, I think, again, recognizing you mightn't be the S&C coach of that team, and that team mightn't be the team for you. Or, again, what I was saying, more likely that manager might be the manager for you, and you mightn't be the coach for that manager. Because I've been involved in squads before where I think, because, like I'm saying, for one reason or another, me, and not that we didn't get along, I've no problem getting along with people, but I couldn't do my best work under particular managers. And I'm sure there would have been another S&C coach out there who could have dealt much better with, let's say, if it was, the organisation of it wasn't what I would expect. But the manager might have had a good reason, the manager might have been able to justify why the schedule was jumping around, but it just wouldn't. I couldn't do my best work in that scenario. There was definitely, I know, some other S&C coaches out there who probably could have done a better job than me. So I think it can be frustrating, obviously, when the team aren't getting the wins and aren't, progressing forward. And at the end of the day, it's sports, so the result, everything's recorded in wins or losses, or whether you won or whether you lost the whole thing. So obviously you do want that. But I think from an S&C coach point of view, I don't think anybody working in S&C in Ireland is going out there thinking, I want to be the S&C coach for an All-Ireland winning team, because we know there's so much more goes into making that win than the S&C or the sports science. Again, we're like a tertiary aspect of that preparation, and much more, like I suppose the fruits of our labour are recognised way after we've done them. It's not like what an S&C coach does with a team on the week of the All-Ireland final is going to make the difference, really. It's all down to, like I said, that development piece, the years of work and everything else. So I don't really know if there's any one key thing that I could say I want to have accomplished that. But certainly, I think if I was able to, and I actually don't even know when I will go away. Like, I don't know if I'll ever stop. I'll probably be just this weird owl lad that's still trying to coach all these, unbelievable athletes and these committed people, and they don't want me around or whatever. They just keep me around because
he's always been. Oh, that lad, he's always been here. He's been here.
Yeah. But I think anyway, I think the big thing for me would be able to look back and say, a couple of things, mainly that I did the best work I could. And then having gained those few lessons from being involved with teams that, again, there was nothing wrong with this setup. I didn't match the setup. Being able to recognise in time often enough if something isn't right, well, look, I should move away and let somebody else do this, and I should move on to something else, or with another team, or with another group. To be able to look back and say that when I was presented with decisions, I took the right decisions, and other than that, I did the best work possible. That's all I can say, really. Yeah, there's nothing too tangible there, but that.
Yeah, all you can do is do the next job to the best of your ability and see where it takes.
That's it.
Margins are so tight in elite sport, you can't plan for much more than that.
Yeah, and look, even from it's probably counterintuitive, because so much of S&C is about assessing where a group are at, or a person is at, putting one of these smart type plans in place and trying to get them towards their goal. And I would consider myself obviously very good at that aspect of things. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, from a business point of view, and even from a career planning point of view, I can't say I'm very strategic. An opportunity comes my way, I take it, and I try and do the best job I can. And over time, I think that snowballs to, you get referrals, and, you hopefully make a good name for yourself, and you get other opportunities. And like I said, the main thing being that when you step away, people say, you help them, you help develop them, you help them progress, and that they'd work with you again. That'd be the main thing.
Yeah, I'd certainly work with you again, and that's for sure. But Conor, that's absolutely top class. Look, if anyone is wondering where they can catch Conor, Armoured Performance, and it's Armoured Performance on Instagram as well, is the gym. It's a class gym out in Round Towers in Clondalkin there. So anyone around, knocking around South Dublin, highly recommend it. Conor, thanks very much. Top class.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Cheers.